letting folks in.
Perfect.
Sorry, should I record too?
Yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to everyone who is joining us from across the country. You've made it to the virtual People's Hearing. You only get what you're organized to take. So if you haven't yet, please share your name, your pronouns, and where you're calling in from in the chat. And we'll get started in just a few minutes. So thanks y'all for being here together tonight.
Welcome everyone. Kristen was having some technical difficulties, so I'm just going to pop in there now. Jamie, I guess we can cut this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tammy.
Oh, there you go. Okay, Kristen's here.
Thank you so much, Tammy. I appreciate you. Yep, my tech is back up. Welcome, everybody. I am so glad everyone's here. I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So my name's Tammy. My pronouns are they, them. I am joining this people's hearing out of the South Central PA region of Pennsylvania, more specifically Lancaster County. I'm a coordinator with the National Union of the Homeless, as well as Put People First Pennsylvania and the tri-chair of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And as of this weekend, a commissioned minister with the Freedom Church of the Poor. So I welcome you all here tonight to the People's Hearing. You only get what you're organized to take. And I'm going to take a moment here to just remind everyone, if you could put your name, where are you joining in from, like town and state, an organization affiliation in the chat that you have. And I'm going to review the agenda here. So after we have Bevan read us the mission statement as a part of our Mystica, Kristen is going to take us into some really grounding information of, what is the Winter Offensive, because that's as part of what we're doing this activity tonight as part of the Winter Offensive organizing drive. And what is the importance of today, December 10th, and why a people's hearing, right? And then we're going to get into the meat of the event, the hearing itself. We will hear witnesses share testimonies of the indictment of the system. We will talk about more specifically a little bit more about Article 25 of the Human Rights Declaration, and then hear a verdict and a call to action and next steps coming out of this event. So again, just as a reminder, if you could put your name, where you're joining from, organization affiliation in the chat. And I will now hand it over to Bevan, who will introduce themselves and be sharing with us the National Union of the Homeless mission statement.
Hello, family. My name is Bevan, she, her pronouns. I'm coming to you from Albany, New York with the National Union of the Homeless chapter. I'm with the National Union of the Homeless, Poor People's Campaign, Nonviolent Medicaid Army, and I'm going to read for you the National Union of the Homeless mission statement. The heart and soul of the National Union of the Homeless is to commit our lives to ending homelessness and poverty and to work tirelessly for the human right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, for social, economic justice for all. We dedicate ourselves to raising the awareness of our sisters and brothers, to planning a sustained struggle, and to building an organization that can obtain freedom through revolutionary perseverance. We pledge to deepen our personal commitment to end all forms of exploitation, racism, sexism, and abuse. True solidarity demands that we create not only the new society, but also the new human being.
Thank you, Bevan. Wow, just take that in for a minute, y'all. And think about the times that we're in. And I'm now going to introduce Kristen, who will more officially introduce herself, and then getting into the grounding, the foundation for tonight's event.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Bevan. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. It is with great gratitude and power that I'm here with you and to launch our first event, our first official event of the 2024 National Union of the Homeless Winter Offensive. This first event is in honor of the Human Rights Anniversary, Human Rights Day of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We ground ourselves in these economic human rights that goes back a few decades. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Union of the Homeless, I'm going to talk about our winter offensive and the national significance of it and the historical significance of it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Declaration itself and the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. My name is Kristen Colangelo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am very proud to have been part of the original Homeless Union with my mom. I came up as a teenager in the National Union of the Homeless, and there are many leaders on this call tonight, back from the original Homeless Union and senior leaders of the current National Union of the Homeless that really directed my life and helped me when I faced poverty and homelessness and despair to understand, to have a true analysis that the system is failing us. That when we find ourselves on the streets, running to the streets, losing a job that throws us onto the streets, and many other reasons we end up homeless, healthcare crisis being another one, that there is no reason why in a country where there are 27 empty units per person that needs a home, that we have to run to our cars, run to RVs, run to tents, and run to the street. There is not a state of scarcity. There's a state of abundance that we have never seen. So it's true abandonment in the face of abundance that we see today. And the National Union of the Homeless developed in the early 80s and through the mid 90s out of a huge shift in the conditions of our country, where many, many people who had jobs that they could support themselves and their family on were eliminated through technology. Overnight, entire families were displaced out of this system that makes it necessary for you to earn your food, for you to earn your healthcare. Our healthcare is tied to our employer, for you to earn the right to have a roof over your head. And across the country, millions of people overnight lost their jobs, lost their ability to earn our very right to live. And we'll get into which, economic human rights that speaks to directly. The National Union of the Homeless grew out of those across the country, across all lines of geography, all lines of difference, came together to say, hey, we're going to organize to change this system that displaces people every day and renders them superfluous, pushes them out of this system, and where we ultimately, the most visible result is homelessness. We organized across the country to where we were in 25 cities with over 35,000 members. We could speak for ourselves. This is a lesson that came out of the original National Union of the Homeless. We could speak for ourselves. We could fight for ourselves, and we could organize ourselves and the country for a better system that is in our interests. The powers that be answered this call as well. And their answer was not organize to make a change. Their answer was nonprofit, shelter systems, and policies. The Winter Offensive grew out of up and out of poverty coalition between the National Union of the Homeless, National Welfare Rights Organization, which you will hear from tonight, and the Anti-Hunger Coalition, in face of hypocrisy around this time of year. From Thanksgiving through Martin Luther King birthday, there is such a concentration of an answer to suffering through charity and through nonprofit social welfare systems that manages or hands out supplies to make the suffering maybe less in this time of year, but it never goes at the systemic cause of what's going on. And we have a very famous comrade that comes out of the civil rights fight that said, we must become root doctors. Albert Turner must become root doctors, spoke at our survival summit in 1989, that we must look at the root cause of poverty, not the limbs and the leaves, not stay up in the symptoms that are created by this system, but end the system. So the organizing of the Winter Offensive, starting in Thanksgiving, where there's so much charity, through Human Rights Day, which I'll get into in a minute, the history of that, through the Longest Night. The Longest Night is our cornerstone event, where annual homeless memorials were held around the country, mostly by nonprofits in shelters where they cleared everybody out of the shelter, washed everything up, made it look pretty, hung some flags, and did photo ops and said, look how fabulous we are. Look what we are doing. And we took that night back. And we hold our own memorials where we'll honor our people. We will fight against them being buried in unmarked, what we call Potter's Field graves. We will give them the dignity in death that they are not given in life. And we started our own memorials on December 21st across this country to uphold and speak the name of those that we've lost that year, and we will continue to fight in their honor. Then we move into Christmas and all the charity and the things that go on that time of year, and we hold up some slogans that say, if you're going to put Christ back into Christmas, you better study the revolutionary work of flipping some tables and being angry at the system that creates shelters, but not a human right to housing. Jesus never asked for a copay. This is another thing that comes out of this is homeless, not helpless. We all could be one paycheck away from homelessness. And we added in that over the evolution of our organizing one healthcare crisis. And we'll hear from people talking about that today. Another slogan that comes out of this is, how can we worship a homeless man on Sunday and walk over him on Monday? Uplifting the hypocrisy of the charity and the removal of the fight against empire that Jesus's life was built on. And then moving into New Year's Eve, and what is a resolution? I'm going to go to the gym. I'm not going to eat any chocolate. Those are great. I just want to also do, and I break them all the time, like 5 minutes. But I do keep my revolutionary resolution, and that is to fight, fight, fight. To organize, 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 to build our poor and dispossessed fighting organizations like the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, the National Welfare Rights Union, the National Union of the Homeless, United Workers, Vermont Worker Center, put people first. Those revolutionary resolutions we can keep, my friends, and in collectivity we can hold each other accountable to keep them when we get a little tired. And then the last is Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King has a day of service that wipes out the last 3 years of his life and his revolutionary work, akin to wiping out Jesus's revolutionary work. The move from civil to human rights and calling out the system that creates poverty. When Martin Luther King was building the Poor People's Campaign, he talked about 60 million poor and dispossessed. We now talk about 140. When we were building the Homeless Union, back in the 80s and 90s, we talked about 8 million homeless in this country. We're up to, we don't even count it correctly, but it's about 18 to 20 million people and about 2 million children. So holding up Martin Luther King's life, his revolutionary battle to end the system that creates poverty. And tonight we honor our human right as outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to owe a living wage job, to education, to housing and healthcare, and others that Tammy's going to dig into a little bit more about each one of the rights in a few minutes. But I want to talk about the evolution in this country of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and our choice politically to not uphold them in this country. After World War II, the UN commissioned a committee around human rights after the atrocities of World War II. And Eleanor Roosevelt headed that committee. Unfortunately, the political will was that at that time, if we ever truly implemented, as other countries did after this time, England and Germany and France and other countries, our economic system built on things like Jim Crow would crumble. We did not ever implement and uphold these human rights in the United States. As we jump forward in the 70s, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations, then developed covenants that more deeply dug into what are these human rights and what do they mean. And a covenant that we focus on in this country is the covenant on social, economic, and cultural rights. There's another covenant for civil and political, and our country President Carter signed that, and our country ratified it, which means it becomes part of our legal system for civil and political. For economic, social, and cultural, this was signed by President Carter, but never ratified. It's not part of our legal system. It's not part of our rights. It's gone through every presidency to the current that have never upheld this right in our country. And what does that mean? That means that we must earn our very substance we need to live, our food, our water and air, our fight for water that comes out of Michigan and the national welfare rights in Michigan, our fight for housing in the National Union of the Homeless, our fight for health and health care in both United Workers, which will speak tonight, and the Nonviolent Medicaid Army. You'll hear from them as well on the right to health and health care. Health is encompassing of all of this. The right to health care is because there's an attack on our health care today where 28 million people have been cut off Medicaid since the unwinding of the pandemic. That is an atrocity, a sin, and a system that must go. It's a system we don't believe in. It no longer serves our interests as a class. It only serves a very few while millions suffer. And that's a system we are here to fight against. So we talk about in this organization, in our organizing, in our movement, and each one of the speakers will talk about this. We talk about the plight, what we're up against. Each speaker will talk about one of these rights, but ultimately, our right to health does not exist in this country. Our fight, how each one of these areas of struggle, these fronts of struggle as we call them, are fighting against that system. But our insight is that we are in a stage of development in our movement to end poverty. Our domestic, our national movement to end poverty is that we need leaders. We need clear leaders on the problem, competent leaders to build organization, connected leaders to the struggle, and committed leaders that stick and stay. And we have to unite those leaders across fronts of struggle and across geography and across lines of division, clear, competent leaders, so that we can build a base building, a grassroots movement, so that we can have power. Our power comes from organization, organization, organization. If you're taking notes tonight and you write anything down, write that down. Our power comes from organization, organization, organization. We use many tactics. That's the fight part. These tactics, if we are not clear on the problem and who we're up against, our tactics are in danger of becoming our strategy if we're not clear on what the ultimate eyes on the prize fight is. So we must come together. We must fight together, organize together, study together, and unite to fight back. And we do this through organization, organization, organization. So again, I want to say welcome. My name's Kristen. I am one of the leaders of the National Union of the Homeless, one of the national organizers, along with my brothers on the call tonight, Anthony Prince in the west of the country. I'm in the east of the country. And then we have many organizers regionally. We have teams. And one of the last things I want to say is that we have a three-pronged approach to building the homeless union. The first is our legal strategy. Our legal strategy is very important, as you know, and it came out of the history of California with Anthony Prince and the leaders, now over 3,000 leaders working through the courts to fight against the illegal criminalization of homelessness and poverty. We have a clergy council that we're building for a number of historical reasons, in that, one, the scriptures of all these texts that we go to, not just Christian, but across the board, they tend to take our study out of context. And one of them is the poor is always among us. So building to really talk about what is the sacred work of organizing, right? And also that our faith communities are often the ones that are tirelessly answering the call of the needs of their community. And they have direct contact with those that are most affected. And we can build organization through those relationships. And Dr. Reverend Savina Martin out of Boston with a team is working on building that nationally. And the third prong is developing, identifying, developing, and training local leaders, local panning for gold, and building organizing committees and ultimately unions to build the homeless union again across the country. And that is something that we organizers, myself and others, are focusing on every day. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for joining us tonight as we hold the system on trial, as my comrade Tammy said when she was thinking about this people's hearing. We're going to hold the system on trial. We're going to hear some testimony about each one of these rights that are outlined in Article 25 of the Universal Declaration. We're going to hear a verdict, and then we're going to hear a call to action. So thank you. Please join us. Also, there's going to be a point at the end where we are going to pick some questions, as we probably won't be able to answer everybody's, but please put questions, comments, and things in the chat. We will be watching the chat, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end to uphold some of that. Jamie and myself will be watching. Jamie welcomed you in tonight with Tammy and I. We'll be watching the chat to write down, and we'll come back to those questions. I'm now going to turn it back over to Tammy to talk about where we are today. So thank you all. Tammy, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Well, that was just, I want to just take a minute and really just take in everything you were saying. Today is historical. We're making history talking about this today together. So before we get into hearing from the witnesses, I'm going to take a few minutes to kind of ground us more specifically in what took place with this past year, right? This year with the Supreme Court and the case around Grants Pass versus Johnson, and then talk about a little bit more about Article 25, and then we'll get into the testimonies. So I just want to share, for me, it was hard. Like when I first started hearing that the Supreme Court agreed to take up this case, it was early in the year when they announced it. And there were some blurbs like in the media, but I heard about it on social media, and it made me dig into what to look into it, because honestly, like, these are things that I don't understand, right? And I was just struck and was like, is this really happening? For me personally, that year, like we were struggling with and facing homelessness. And how it directly personally felt for me was we're about to enter a fight for our very human right to even exist in this nation. And that the reason why these attacks are happening, we need to understand that this Supreme Court taking up this case and ruling in favor of Grants Pass, there was a bipartisan effort by people in power, and even led by folks like Newsom, the governor in California, to get the Supreme Court to rule in favor of Grants Pass against the people they are elected to protect. That's insane. And so the National Union of the Homeless as people who are directly impacted by this front of struggle and are organizing on the front lines across this nation, like we needed to get our narrative out there. And there was a grouping of us that worked collectively to kind of create this statement / article that's going to be shared there in the chat. Our viewpoint at that time, right? And what we learned by studying collectively together what this all means, we learned about the big organization and big money behind this, getting this really passed. And there was 3 justices that voted against that, right? The rest of them voted in favor of grants passed. But it was enough for that ruling to basically, and what it means is unhoused folks are no longer protected under the Constitution from this cruel and unusual punishment. And so we're like, they opened up the floodgates to criminalize homelessness across the board. This is literally, we're talking, if you are outside, you're unhoused, you need a blanket to try to stay warm in the freezing cold, you could be criminalized. You could be ticketed, you could be jailed, this is literally beyond your control. We know the system creates homelessness. And so I encourage you all to read the post that we put together. There's a lot of information in that. But this is what inspired me to like want to do this people's hearing. Like, okay, they want to put us on trial? No, we need to put them on trial for their policy violence against us, for their policy murder against us. And so now I'm going to read this little blurb here about Article 25 out of the Declaration of Human Rights. And then I'm going to start to introduce the witnesses and testifiers that kind of speak to this particular article. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children shall enjoy the same protection. So that's a part from Article 25. And with that, and I think there's going to be a link shared in that you can read the different articles and see a little bit more. But as Kristen shared, kind of the evolution it has taken since then. And with that, we're now going to get into the testimonies. And I'm going to just remind that when these folks, these witnesses are going to be sharing their testimonies, they're going to get into the plight, fight, and insight for this hearing that's going to show that we only get what we're organized to take, or as Willie Baptist says, freedom ain't free. So the first witness is Michael Coleman from the United Workers.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everyone is doing all right, at least, right? Tammy, that was very powerful. I appreciate you sharing that and grounding us. It was pretty powerful. Well, yeah, this system definitely needs to be on trial, right? They constantly, consistently just seek to divide and destroy us. This is a constant machine that we're dealing with. You know, I've lived in poverty all of my life, you know, and I've seen and experienced the devastation that this system can do to us, right? People sick. My aunt right now is in the hospital because of her, I guess, and you guys got to bear with me, because I know I'm going to get like really emotional, because we can't really afford. My aunt is about to pass away. None of us can really afford to take care of her and get her the meds that she needs, and the therapy that she needs, and all of her conditions is because she lived in poverty. This is a woman that worked all of her life. You know, my mom's the same way. My mom is now deceased, because she pretty much worked herself to death. You know, one of the narratives that's put before us is that people don't work hard enough, or people don't pursue the in fact, people don't pursue the resources that is available to them. Well, I call bullshit. That is absolutely bullshit. Um, yeah, I remember what it was like to not have a job and be out in the streets scrambling to try to make things work. I remember when it was like to be sick, and not be able to bring home a check that was really worth anything. I remember when it was like to not be able to work because I had childcare issues and not, having someone to look after my children, while I worked and earned income. You know, barriers, a lot of different barriers, a lot of different issues. And I challenge everyone here to really think about how these issues connect to each other, how they overlap. United Workers, we studied, we went out and we talked to people about what their issues are while as we were deciding what our next campaign was going to be. And we heard all kinds of stories, all the issues. So when it came time to pick an issue to focus on, we couldn't do it because all of the issues, we talk about housing. Some of our members are homeless. We talk about food insecurity. There's a lot of people live in food deserts. And even if you don't live in a food desert, you can go to the store and not be able to afford the food. We're talking about joblessness. We're talking about a lot of the different issues. And all of this affects our health. And this is how we came to the conclusion that we really needed to come up with a campaign that encompasses all of these things, all the things that affects our health, and so this is where we came up with the right to health. And I will say that, after a lot of deliberating and study and conversations and hearing the stories, it was unanimous that we, start this right to health campaign in the way that we are. Yeah, just hearing, I don't know, it's a lot, but it's doable because we have the power, right? But we only have that power when we come together. So we must consistently organize, just like the machine is organizing against us, right? So yeah, we just left, and I'm beginning to wrap up here. I think I'm running close to my time, but we just left in action in Cumberland, Maryland, which is Western Maryland, where the city decided to ban people from eating in a public park. Well, this happened to be a park where a lot of the homeless people come together, right? It was a very transformative event. There was people there we haven't met before who was just excited. They were empowered. They were ready to get involved. There was people there who helped pull this thing together that wasn't even a member of United Workers less than 2 months ago. So there's new people coming in and they're stepping up. So we just need to get out, talk to people, share their hear their stories, share their stories, and organize. Organize. And everything we do has to be around organizing our class. Everything. We have to organize and we have to do leadership development because we're going to need those leaders, right? We need more people in this room. Everyone in this room is considered a leader. You're here and you're here for a reason. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. But yeah, I appreciate you guys' time, and yeah, let's do the damn thing, y'all. And sorry about the lighting. I'm in my room, a little lamp in the corner. But
Thank you, Michael. That was absolutely powerful. And really like fits this, people's hearing of you only get what you're organized to take. That's exactly what we need to do. Organize. They're not just going to hand this over to us clearly, or we would have had this stuff decades ago. So thank you for that powerful testimony. And next, I'm going to introduce Max, who's with Philadelphia Act Up and the homeless union there in Pennsylvania. Take it away, Max.
Hey, and some of us homeless union folks are here. There's other folks from Philly joining the call from other locations. That's Uncle Joe with me on the camera right there. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that freedom from fear and freedom from want are the highest aspiration of the common people, and that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for their health and well-being. Across the U.S., we do not have a human right to housing. Fear, want, and a lack of health and well-being all come from being denied access to housing. In the Philly Homeless Union, here are just a few situations where not guaranteeing our human right to housing has impacted our safety, our well-being, our livelihood, and our health. Our members have lost housing due to landlord neglect that leads to buildings being condemned, due to fires, due to illness or injury, due to job loss during the pandemic and the rents rising like crazy, and not being able to find another place where we can afford first, last, and security to move in. Losing housing in this country means almost always living in shelter or outside. Here's how that has impacted our health and well-being. When you're waiting for shelter intake, if you doze off in the chair, they send you outside in the freezing wet weather, even if you don't have a coat. When you get through housing intake, they only offer us emergency overnight first come, first served shelter. If you get in that night, instead of just waiting out online for no reason, if you get in that night, you end up sleeping on the floor without being able to bring your own blanket, with the lights on every night and wake up before 5 a.m. It is literally worse for our health to be in the emergency overnight shelter than sleeping outside. We should all have the right to 8 hours of good sleep. If you do sleep outside, you're ticketed and harassed and threatened with arrest by the police for sleeping outside, even when there is no shelter available. And that's in a city that hasn't passed any of the legislation that Grants passed has opened up for cities. When you do get into a permanent shelter, the toilets don't work. The heat doesn't work. There are no outlets in the room for using a CPAP machine or a nebulizer. There's black mold in the walls and showers. There's no ladder for the bunk bed, and they only have top bunks. Every single one of those situations has caused our members to have illness, injury, and even be hospitalized. Shelters are not our solution for homelessness. Shelters are the system solution to try to avoid having to actually provide housing to everyone. The only way in Philadelphia to get connected with the very limited supply of permanent affordable housing and case management is waiting for weeks in the emergency overnight shelter, then spending months or years in so-called transitional shelters, or being out on the street and waiting to be documented by street outreach for at least 14 months. That long of sleeping on concrete every single night, or sleeping in these overcrowded, unsafe shelters, just to be able to access the waiting list for permanent housing. What they're hoping is that we give up or die before they have to actually help us. We know this is not just a violation of our human rights, it's a symptom of a sick system that prioritizes landlords' wealth over our rest, our safety, our health, and well-being. In Philadelphia, the city spends $1,400 per person per month on these inadequate, crammed together shelter beds, whether they are occupied or not. And in Philly, that's enough to rent a nice one-bedroom apartment. Kristen told us that there's 27 empty houses for every single person who's homeless in America. So in Philly and across the country, as the National Union of the Homeless, we're fighting back using this human rights framework. In Philly, we lobbied City Council to create an ombudsman for homeless services. And through our hard work, persistence, and showing up to tell stories that have never been told in City Council chambers before, an ombudsman is being hired by the end of this year. And we will be ready for them with organized people telling their stories and following up to show that when we fight together, we can get what we are organized to take. We specifically chose to fight for an ombudsman rather than asking for something like more money for shelters, because it gives us the opportunity to keep organizing, keep telling our stories, and creating places where we can push and expose the system and unite the poor people who don't have access to our basic human rights to demand it back.
Thank you, Max. Powerful fight insight right there. You know, it's just when thinking about the ombudsman, I think how Put People First PA is fighting for the public health care advocate, and how having something like that in place could be a powerful structural to interconnect these things, because as we've all been sharing, health is connected to all of this, right? And as someone who definitely has worked in the industry, in the shelter industry, as employed through that, I can tell you that it is hard on both staff and to those that rely on that services. Like it's very emotionally draining and tough and intense. And I was homeless while working at a homeless shelter. So definitely echoing what you shared. Experience some of the same struggles, absolutely. So thank you for that powerful testimony and indictment of the system and against their solution, you know. Next, I'm going to introduce Maureen Taylor from the Michigan Welfare Rights Union State Chair. Can you go ahead and take it away, Maureen? Maureen, I don't know if you're on mute or not, but I do also want to chime in. I keep forgetting to remind folks to please put any questions or comments in the chat that we want to kind of solidify as we go, because we'll have some time to hopefully respond to some of them. But again, Maureen, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Maureen, can you come on screen so we can spotlight you for the people that we're casting out to?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Already, this computer's been working 110%, except when you called my name. What can I say? Okay. Let's just go forward, and I'll fumble along with these things because I know there are time constraints. So if you can hear me, that's enough. You don't have to be able to see me. Go into any post office, and there's a picture of me that's wanted. So, you know, whatever that is. All right. I bring you all greetings from Michigan Welfare Rights. My name is Maureen Taylor, and I serve as state chair of the Welfare Rights Organization. I want to start my brief comments and lift up that rascal Jesus. Just a worrisome Jesus, always involved and taking people to a higher level. And because we do a lot of work with access to water, I wanted to highlight for everyone on this call who probably already knows this, that Jesus was all about water, walking on it in the storm and not drowning. Jesus changing some of the water into wine. Jesus washing people's feet with it. Jesus sprinkling water on people's heads. That rascal was all over the place dealing with water And so it's an amazing thing that several of the pastors in the Detroit area went through the Bible, and whatever version, King James, King Michael, Rebecca, whoever Bible source they went through. And Jesus always talked about water, and throughout the Bible, 72 references about the Bible and water. Okay, so you would think that in 2024, certainly in the Detroit, Wayne County, Michigan area, we still wouldn't be talking about whether or not people have access to public water, whether they can pay for it or not. And that's been a battle, a struggle that we've been involved with more than 14 years. And as a matter of fact, this very day, just heard some information about some possible legislation that's going to be discussed in Lansing tomorrow that might help us with that particular situation. But that rascal Jesus, and I've been told that rascal Jesus was friends with Muhammad and just had a whole bevy of different kind of buddies, different kind of comrades. And they were all saying pretty much the same thing. Why don't we treat each other better? Then I want to take you all to, and I've listened to the brilliant comments and stories of comrades that have already spoken. And I want to touch briefly on why I think in welfare rights across the nation, why we keep failing to win over the American working class. And our contention is that we've been all sold a bill of goods. Somebody said, look, let me tell you what's good. Let me tell you what's correct. Let me tell you who you should be fighting, right? And this division, divide and conquer, is an excellent tool. So, a group of people had to target Black folks. Then another group of people had to come along and target white folks. And then what's current right now, immigrants. Brown people are on the barbecue grill right now. And then we've had some experience with gay folks, transgender folks. Got to target them. They're the reason. They're the ones that are in the way of us being happy. And then most recently, we had to target the Democrats, and then target Republicans, and then target independents. And of course, Jews and Muslims is the what do you call that? The sandwich of the day. That's the one. That's the hot one that's going on right now. I drew the line at this presidential election because I have a particular feeling about Republicans and Democrats and independents. But I heard a lady got on TV and said, look, here's what I want to do. I'm going to give you $6,000 if you have a new baby to help you with that baby. And I thought, damn, I never heard nobody say that before. I'm going to give you $25,000 to help you with your new house that you're trying to buy. I thought, damn, that's a good idea. Not enough, but I ain't never heard nobody say that before. $50,000 to help you with a start of a new business. And I said, that is a good idea. Then we got to 3 million new homes going to be built, different sizes. And I thought that's 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I never heard anybody else say. And for that reason, I think this person deserves a look. Work for them or work hard for them. And on the day of the election, it was clear to me that the next day we were going to start kicking her ass, all right? But up until the day of the election, we're going to go along with this. And somebody suggested that she was not good enough. Well, here we go again. Somebody creating a list and explaining to people, and a lot of us buy into that, why we can't choose for ourselves. We can't envision or for ourselves what it is we need for our lives. I'm going to end my remarks with a little historical trip down memory lane. When you all hear about Detroit, you think, okay, cars, Motown, this is what we do. And I'm not going to deny that. You all can't see me now, but I am as bright as a bumblebee. Y'all have no idea what I look like at this moment. But I represent Detroit because we are bright. We are yellow. We are orange. And that's how we deal. That's how we roll. But in about the 1910s, 1920s, the most cars being built were being built right here in the Detroit area. All right. 100,000 employees over a period of time. 100,000 employees over a period of time were ended up working in something or working at something called an assembly line. And that meant that we had a transition plant, transmission plant is what I want to say, transmission plant. We have foundries, we have forge plants, glass plants, transmission plants, all the parts that have to do with a car. And in this one building was the assembly, and the next building was the forge, and the next building was whatever the next thing was, and it went down the road. And at the end of these buildings, it rolled out a car. And again, 100,000 employees was the largest number of employees, mostly in a place called the Ford Rouge complex. At that time, there were just under 100,000 employees connected to all of these different buildings, all of these separate tasks. Today, my son works at Ford Rouge complex. Came from 100,000 employees, and today is just over 7,000 employees. What were they doing in the days when it was 100,000 employees, however many cars? They were producing per hour. Today, they produce 57 times more cars per hour than they were doing before. And so that should give us a hint on where the enemy is. Every time a worker is replaced by technology, replaced by a computer, replaced by AI, every time that happens, what it means is fewer of us are needed. And if you're not needed, why should we spend time educating you? Why should we spend time providing health care for you? You're not going to do nothing with it. Why should we waste time making certain that you have housing? Why should we do all of these things as if you are a contributing member of society? Because we have been thrown on the heap of we can be let go. And let go is another word for we can be killed and nothing happens. I got a lady who right now been in the hospital from October to December the 2nd. She's 84 years old. She lost her left leg about 6 or 7 years ago and spends all of her time trying to deal with drainage and wounds and abscesses on that disabled leg. And when she came home on Saturday, this is Tuesday now, I'm talking about 3 days ago. When she came home on Saturday, her water had been cut off. She called me. And I've known the family for years. I called the water department. What the hell are y'all doing? Well, she haven't paid the bill in 2 months. Go tell your mammy to pay the bill in 2 months. I don't hear that crap. You goddamn it, get that water turned on, or I'm going to send somebody over there to turn it on and turn yours off. How about that? Maureen, don't be like that. Don't be upset. Her water will be turned on in an hour. And it was. But why do I have to make the Declaration of Human Rights argument to another human being that is absolutely clear, that is devastatingly outrageous to cut somebody's water off? Why do I have to make that fight? Along with your school books when you're in the first grade, and your math books and your reading and writing books and your history books, I have advocated along with welfare rights for years. Every student ought to have a copy of the Declaration of Human Rights, all of them, so that even before they can read, they are understanding this is the way people are supposed to act. We should not be hurting and harming people the way we do on a regular basis. I'm going to end my remarks by saying and quoting the masters, which I quote often. At this time, I'm quoting Star Trek. And I'm talking about Spock. And Spock and Captain Kirk are having this discussion near the end of Spock's life. And they're talking back and forth about, oh my goodness, what's going to happen, Spock? Look like you about to die. And Spock tells Kirk, just a minute, let me say this to you. And I'm going to say this to all of you that are on this call. The needs of the many must always outweigh the needs of the few and the one. My name is Maureen Taylor. I'm state chair of Michigan Welfare Rights, and I ain't scared of a goddamn thing. Thank you for inviting me.
Woo, Maureen. I got a couple of responses on that one. One, we had to process gifts for the commissionings this weekend, and fiery orator was utilized for me in the discussion. I feel like that described you too. And that was used to describe Mother Jones back in the day. So
okay.
Thank you,
thank you, dear. All right.
And so thank you for that powerful testimony. Absolutely. Thank you. I'm gonna just again remind folks, comments, questions in the chat so we can hopefully have some time to answer a few. Now we have one more testifier and then we have a verdict. And that testifier is Joe from New York, the Albany Homeless Union, and the Nonviolent Medicaid Army.
Check, check. Hey, y'all. Hope you can hear. You can't see quite all of us because we're a little spread out, but there's about a dozen folks in the room with me right now from our Homeless Union chapter, from our Nonviolent Medicaid Army, and from our Poor People's Campaign. And we are in a church basement where tomorrow morning, as it was this morning, and every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, over 150 people gather for a hot breakfast. And this is where our chapter of the Homeless Union was born. It came out of conversations and talking to folks and saying, hey, we keep coming here. More and more people keep showing up. Things ain't getting better. What are we going to do about it? And we started getting organized. And as Kristen told us earlier, one of the slogans of the Homeless Union is you're only one paycheck away from homelessness. And we've extended that, right, to say you're only one healthcare crisis away as well. And in our organizing here in the Capital Region, the direct connection of the lack of healthcare and housing insecurity is made evident all the time. Health issues are constantly being identified as a precipitating event, the thing that caused and led someone into homelessness. And then once someone is homeless, health issues of all types only get worse. And healthcare is a big industry in our Capital Region. Albany Med Center is the only level 1 trauma center in our region. It is the largest employer in our area, and yet they have a massive staffing shortage, and they have the longest emergency room wait times in the country. It is outrageous to expect that anyone could improve their physical or their mental health while they are struggling to secure decent housing. And here at our breakfast, out on the street, story after story after story, healthcare and housing are inextricably connected. We know that decent housing is healthcare and vice versa. You can't have any kind of health without stable housing. And these injustices that we've been hearing about are compounded by the indignity and the shame that is hurled at homeless people by the politicians. They offer wholly inadequate band-aids, and then they will go on the news and publicly say, some people just don't want help. Some people just refuse services. Well, you know what? No shit. Because when the so-called help on offer is a moldy room or a rushed visit with a counselor that ends with you back on the street and nowhere to go, that's not any kind of help at all. We want dignity. We want respect. We want choices. We want our human rights to food, to clothing, to housing, and medical care. And we're going to get organized and fight for those things. This is why the National Union of the Homeless was part of the founding of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army back in 2020, why we are strategic partners in our organizing. And everybody here, it really doesn't matter. We wear all those hats all the time. In the past year, around our country, over 25 million people have been kicked off Medicaid in what has been called an unwinding, but has really just been a massive taking away of healthcare of the poor and most vulnerable among us. Most of those people were kicked off, not because they weren't eligible for Medicaid any longer, but due to procedural reasons, paperwork that didn't reach them, maybe because they had moved in the past couple of years, or paperwork that wasn't filled out correctly. And we know that in our country, under our present economic system, which prioritizes profit above all else, that our human rights to housing and healthcare cannot be guaranteed. They cannot be guaranteed under this present system. The system that exploits poor and working people to put all of the wealth and the resources into the hands of a tiny, tiny few, that system's got to end if we're going to make sure that that UN Declaration of Human Rights becomes true in reality. The only way we're going to end this system is by doing what we're doing here in this room, by doing what you're doing all over the country, by doing what we're doing when we gather together on Zoom and share these stories, by getting organized, by uniting our class across all lines of division. And as we have heard repeatedly, folks saying, to do that, we need to identify and develop and unite our leaders and develop clarity and competence, commitment, connectedness. We know that the solution ain't a light switch. It ain't going to happen overnight. It ain't going to happen in the next hour. We need to be committed to a long-term struggle, right? It took a while for them to take away all these rights, for them to make sure that the system was set up against us. And they've got the advantage, right? The people who benefit from this system, they have the advantage. Frederick Douglass talked about this with the slave power when he was talking back in the abolition movement. He said the pen, the purse, and the sword are all in the hands of the people in power, the slave power. And he said they are organized and they were not at pains to create that organization. But our class, the poor and working class, are disorganized. We are disunited. We are broken apart. And that is by design, because they know we outnumber them. They know if we get organized and we begin to exercise our power even a little bit, they won't be in power much longer. So I'm glad for all of our folks to be gathering here with you all. It's been so great. Powerful to hear all these testimonies. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. And, in the response to that, like, I was one of the 25 million cut from my Medicaid. I went without my Medicaid for several months due to a state clerical error. And the multitude of phone calls and paperwork and, just thank goodness to folks and Put People First PA and my case managers and stuff to get in there and fight, because that was absolutely insane. And so these masses of people have been cut, and that's going to lead to a more significant rise in homelessness. And then they're structured to sit there and criminalize us for that in turn, right? So I wanted to kind of like take that in, that all these attacks, all these things, right, are going to it's already setting a stage for our worsening conditions. People have already in this past year have felt a significant, intense attacks on different sectors of the poor working class. Like, conditions have been so horrible that 90 million people didn't even go vote for anyone. That's the reality. That number of people, if they organized and were in step together and voted as a collective bloc, would have outbeaten the amount of votes that any or either major political party candidate got. That's the reality, right? Because conditions are that bad. Now, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew Rosing from the National Union of the Homeless, minister of the Freedom Church of the Poor, and a coordinator with Put People First PA, who is going to read our verdict coming out of today's people's hearing. Taking all the testimonies from the witnesses, the evidence we have, Matt's going to lay it on down for us.
Thank you, Jamie. We heard from these witnesses who shared their testimonies of plight, fight, and insight of the policy violence committed by those in power. We have evidence that 140 million people in the United States are poor or low income. That is over 43% of our nation's population. 25 million economically struggling people were cut from their Medicaid. Homelessness has reached record numbers in communities across the nation, while we have 27 open homes to every single individual who needs one. Over 250,000 people die in this country every year because of poverty. That's 800 people a day. This empire and systemic oppression of the poor and dispossessed have led to unnecessary suffering and death on an unimaginable scale. Through my own ministry, my personal experiences with homelessness and incarceration, I have seen the state violence firsthand. We condemn this unjust system. We have moved well past the time of reform. We need to demand true revolutionary change to end death in the streets, hunger, mass suffering, and untimely deaths. We find this system and empire guilty, crimes against humanity. We demand that our elected officials enact policies and procedures that guarantee us our basic human rights to housing, healthcare, food, clean air and water, and overall general welfare. We must unite to get organized, or we only get what we're organized to take.
Thank you, Matt, for laying out that verdict there. The system is guilty, empire is guilty, and now it is up to us to change this tide and this conditions that we're in. And now with that, I believe I pass it back over to Kristen.
I don't know, y'all. I'm feeling pretty inspired. Got some powerful leaders from our right to health, our right to health care, our right to housing, our right to water, clean air. I did not see, though I watched the chat as much as I could. I was getting all inspired, though. I was getting into people speaking. If folks would like to come off mute and have a question or a comment, put your name in the chat and we can call you. Call on you as we see your name. So I'll give folks a second. If anyone, Esther, absolutely, Esther, come off mute, my sister from Put People First, Pennsylvania. Happy you're here.
Hi guys, Esther, she, her pronouns. So, it's a shame, especially where I live at the homelessness count. And, I work out in the community, do a lot of volunteering and all that. And the realization is all these buildings that are just sitting here that could be transformed into shelters or even homes. Forget shelters. Let's forget shelters, right? Because they're temporarily. We need homes. So even myself is one step right now away from homelessness. And if I fall that way, I'm back into tent. I'm going to be out there living in tents. I'm going to be out there wandering, trying to get into overcrowded shelters. So today I was faced with the issue. People know that I'm part of Put People First when we fight. So a guy came up to me because we have a shelter that only holds 27 beds, and they put 70 people in the shelter. And they were laying on the floor, and the others had to lay in the parking lot, right? And they want to know what we could do to help them fight for like a right. And it was just saddened to me, and literally crying with the guy because his whole face is broken because he had a seizure and fell on the concrete, y'all. And his whole face is broke. And I cried for him because of the lack of shelter, the lack of health care that is in our system. It's sad.
That's right.
And I love nations because we could fight. And we just have to get out here, And a lot of the homeless is scared to go into shelters. A lot of them are scared to get treatment that is needed, because a lot of them is hurting and their health is declining, but they can't get the treatment because it's not here. You know what I'm saying? So, it's just hard out here today.
That's right.
It's really and we got a president now that's going to like make it 10 times harder.
That's
So
right.
we must get out here and organize and teach our class to organize to get what is ours. And that's just the bottom line. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much, Esther. Right on time and right on point. Thank you. Thank you. Ooh, I'm back on the screen. Somebody's got to come and speak, or are you just going to look at me? Other thoughts, comments? I think everybody has touched on that the solutions given to us by the structure that's in place today is not adequate. Shelter does not fill a right to housing. I'm sorry, somebody's coming off mute. Come on.
It's Maureen.
Hey.
You know, I want to do a math a calculation. If there are 140, 150 million people that are low income or real close to that, we're not responsible for organizing all of them. All we need is a portion of that 140, 150. Welfare Rights is already interviewing and taking a look at a third party, not third party that everybody else is talking about. We're talking about in the engine is somebody from the National Union of the Homeless, somebody from one of the food coalitions, somebody from certainly some housing activities, but the first car behind the engine is full of the experts about housing. The next car is full of the experts about water. The third car is full of the experts about immigration. The fourth car, and on down the line. And all we got to do is we got songs and everything in place already. Route 66. We just got to get the train moving. And all we have to do is the expert, we need one or two experts in the engine, and we're going this way. And then every time we find a group of people that are talking about we're being mistreated, this poverty is much too much, this homelessness is much too much, we can't get health care, and we gonna put a carload of people to carry this train to freedom. This is a freedom train that we are building. We already heard from the president of the UAW, said that in May, matter of fact, May 1st of 2028, 4 years from now, they want to organize people across the country to call for a national work stoppage. Hey, we right on board. Guess who's in the engine that we building? President Sean Fain. He already on board. All we have to do is just get a significant portion. It don't have to be all. It don't have to be half. It's just got to be those folks that want this train toward freedom. And freedom ain't free like the Baptist says, but this train is going this way. We can do this.
That's right. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you. Thank you. We have time for one more question or comment, if anyone feels so moved.
This is Terrell.
Hey, Terrell, United Workers in the house.
Thank you. I think it's quite fitting that we find ourselves in this space after the outcomes of the previous election. Like when we look, one of the beautiful things about the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, the National Union of the Homeless, United Workers, all these different spaces, is that we don't just deal with the experiences that we have and that our neighbors are experiencing, but we also learn from history. And as we look to history, every major change that our country has needed, our world has needed, has started at the bottom. And it was always precipitated by a moment that showed that there was no possible balancing act any longer between two forces. So if we look at the abolitionist movement, slavery and freedom could not coexist any longer. If we look at the civil rights movement, like separate but equal, could no longer be something that could be hidden in plain sight. We couldn't confuse what we were seeing. And so a system that has shown again and again that when we cry out in need, the response is death, then we know that we can only have liberty if we kill it. And I think it is such a powerful moment that we find ourselves in, partly because we have been going in this way for years now, and so many people are waking up, not necessarily in the spaces to get organized at that moment, but realizing that they cannot live any longer with this system. And that is the beginnings of awakening the sleeping giant that we are. So I am excited because all of us know and continue to keep knowing that we must fight, and we must fight to win, because that is the only way we survive. That is the only way we thrive. That is the only way we will flourish on an earth that is the bounty for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Has Jamie made it back on camera? Oh, here she is. We are about to turn it over to our Reverend Dr. Savina Martin. I just want to make sure that the mic is working. Savina, when you hear me, can you say hey?
Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. You can take me off spotlight, Jamie. Yes.
I am back. I don't know what happened. The computer just froze. Look.
Enough.
Oh, my Maureen. Miss you. Look, we heard so much here tonight. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Savina Martin, and I was among the early leaders of the original Union of the Homeless, along with Christian's mom and many others. And we partnered in the late 80s along with National Welfare Rights, right? And the Anti-Hunger Coalition. Look, everyone knows the story, and everyone knows that right now, we know the system is guilty. Guilty is charged. So let us call to action. But more than that, let us take action together to become a new and unsettling force, right? Let's focus our hearts and minds on what we just heard and what we know for sure, that we are all committed and we're clear about taking back what is ours. That tonight is our declaration to these United States and beyond. Because there is something that says when in the course of human events, there are some things that we must do. We must rise together in this winter offensive. We all know the cold bite of injustice, and we know the weight of this system. We know it's built to exclude us, the poor, the homeless, who are organizing the poor and working. How about our class, our working class? We're rising together. But we must do what we have heard today, which is the call to organizing. And our conviction right now is we aren't going anywhere. As long as we have no other choice but to live on the streets and rat-infested motels and in shelters, we will organize and take back what is ours. This is our moment. The National Union of the Homeless calls on all of us tonight to join this winter offensive, a movement made up of leaders, fighters, thinkers. We're relentless, we're strong, and we're on the ready. We're getting into step and we're getting into formation. And together, We will fight for the undeniable truth, which is housing as a human right. Our dignity, look, our dignity is non-negotiable. And no one is free till all of us are free. And until we have a right to have food, have adequate housing, to be warm, to be dry, and not burn in a vacant home, trying to keep warm, we must continue to demand health care and the right to fare well. These are our basic necessities. And this system, as Matt and Tammy charge, are guilty. You're guilty as charged. And we are coming for our stuff. We are organizing, we are getting into step, and we are taking back what is ours. We want and demand housing. We face a nation where homelessness is criminalized. Healthcare is denied, and survival is treated as a crime. But history teaches us this. Change does not come to the quiet and compliant. It comes to those who rise and organize and demand what is just. It is loud, it is messy, it is disorganized, but we must get into step and plan and carry out our tactics as we did in the National Union of the Homeless when we were taking over housing. We didn't have no cell phones, honey, but we traveled with a stack of dimes and we went to those telephone booths and says, hello, this is the National Union of the Homeless and we're taking over your HUD houses. We're up against a sophisticated enemy. But this winter, let us understand and study what we're doing. Let our action be that blue flame that cuts through steel, a flame that cannot be ignored. We must occupy public spaces continuously with our voices and stories, making visible the lives hidden in the shadows under the bridges and in parking lots and subway stations, encampments and tunnels. Let us build coalitions with our partners, Freedom Church of the Poor, National Welfare Rights, Poor People's Campaign, Nonviolent Medicaid Army, across all lines of division, housed, unhoused, young and old, North and South, East and West, faith believers, non-believers, gay, straight, queer, artists, and our children who are not in the way but are the way. Let's continue to pressure lawmakers to end these policies that perpetuate our poverty, criminalization, and neglect. We will create a long list of demands for the long wait list of harms you cause, Mr. System. We must build power with one another, that the poor and dispossessed, we're not powerless. We are the architects of a new tomorrow. Study with us and learn with us. Become an officer with the National Union of the Homeless Officers Training School. Stick with Kristen. Stick with the leaders in the membership coordination. You are bound to hit the streets clear and committed, and I say conscious and connected. Listen, you study with us. We must not forget the study. And while we study to get what is ours, bread, peace, and land, in the spirit of our ancestors who fought for freedom, justice, and equality, let us honor their legacy by confronting the system that oppresses us today. And lastly, we are not alone. And together we are unstoppable. Join us, organize with us, rise with us. The Winter Offensive is more than a movement. It is a declaration that we will no longer be silenced, no longer be unseen, no longer unheard or denied. We are a movement led by the poor and working class of this nation, building power from the bottom up to end poverty, because justice will not come to us. We must take it. The winter, let us make history together. Stand up, speak out, take action. The time is now. Ashe and amen.
Yes. Savina, thank you. Thank you. That is our call action. We are right at our time. I just want to remind folks of just a couple statements to leave you with before we go. The first is we may be homeless, but we are not helpless. That we, the poor and the homeless, can and must lead our struggle to end poverty. That we are all one paycheck or healthcare crisis away from homelessness. This is a class issue. We are homeless because we don't have enough money for a home. We say housing now, healthcare now, no more death on the streets. And my friends, our power is in each other, as Reverend Savina just closed out. You only get what you're organized to take. Freedom isn't free. Anything they give us, they can snatch away. We only get what we're organized to take. Up and out of poverty now. Through organization, we will win this fight. Please keep in mind, in your area, you can do a homeless memorial on December 21st, the longest night. That's the next date in the winter offensive. We'll put the email for the National Union of the Homeless in the chat again. Please reach out, please join, and fight, fight, fight. Organize, organize, organize. We only get what we're organized to take. I want to thank all the speakers tonight. I want to thank Tammy and Matt for your facilitation and the verdict. Reverend Savina, Maureen, Mike from United Workers, Joe, everybody from Max, from Philadelphia. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bevan from New York for reading our mission, our Mystica tonight. Thank you as well. And good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. This was amazing. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.